Hello fellow engineers and welcome back to Factorial. My name is Nasty, and in today's exciting episode we're going to talk through the Sulfur Upcycler build that I had created in previous episodes. So I'm going to be revisiting this a little bit, again given that I'm trying to compare Q1 production of chemical science versus Q2. So what I already have created before is I already have a union that I've already created a design and fully clocked this, so we'll talk about this towards the end of the video. And then I will create a second section to finalize this with the red circuit portion of the design. So we're going to focus for this right now just on sulfur production, and one of the goals that I have is I would really like it is if we could recreate this design, because you can already see how nice and tileable this is going to be. Like basically this is already going to perfectly tile, and that's one of the main goals that I have, is to try to fit all of this as best as I can, and that's one of the design constraints I'm having, is that it has to fit within this blueprint. So that's already the first problem, is this is one tile off, and that's because of the cargo wagon. So I'm going to experiment with something today that I haven't messed with before, and I'm excited to do it. So I haven't messed with this beautiful thing called cars. The cars have a cursed hitbox. You can basically use these to insert things in all kinds of weird combinations, and so I'm going to try this, and the goal here is to benchmark this original design that I have, which if you missed it, there was a brute force calculation that I did to create all the possible combinations to get this at a production rate that we needed, and the math worked out that it would wind up being that this was the optimal configuration to have exactly 2 cryogenic plants to produce exactly 30 items per second. On revisiting that, there's some game constraints that wind up coming into play, and there's these start and stops that I didn't really account for. So it works out in rounding that this happens to continue to produce usually the amount of sulfur that you wind up needing. But I think in practice, like the first mistake that I made here was not just replacing this with quality. Like there's not going to be very much benefit to having that extra productivity module. And it winds up being that it just like basically the chances get reduced enough, and because of the start and stop nature, this doesn't wind up actually helping all that much for the actual production in the end. So switching this immediately to quality is going to be the first thing that I'm going to do to change this. And then what I'm going to do is, let's see if we can redesign this a little bit. What I don't like is these constant flickering that's going on with these inserters, and so let's try this from scratch. I'm going to try to use cars for this today, because this is going to potentially make this even more compact. So let's get started with that. So let's start with just the cryogenic plant. So one of the things that I know I'm going to need is to get to basically a crafting speed of around 53. The easiest way to do that is basically just this. I know this because I've already pre-computed and calculated this, and go see my original Q2 chemical science video, which I'll have linked in the video description, and you can go and see how I actually computed the values for this, which is a fun calculation. So we're going to start with this. So the next thing that I'm going to probably do is copy a couple different components. Let's just copy basically these things here. Let's just copy basically all these inserters that are here. That's probably a decent idea. Let's get rid of the rails, get rid of this stuff, and then let's just have a couple of these things that are already going to be pretty useful for us to use. So combination of this, and this. So let's figure this out. Let's figure out the hitboxes that we can mess with here. So the one thing that I know I'm going to want is I know I'm going to want a quality upcycler, right? So like ideally I'd love these to be kind of facing each other, kind of like this, if we can make that work. And one of the things that I know about cars is that you can do things like this, where it doesn't really it's not aligned to the grid, so we can easily kind of fit it like this. But first, one of the things I know I'm going to need to pull out of this is I know that I'm going to need to basically pull out a version of basically the higher quality items. So we can choose one of them. I don't really care which one, so I'll choose this one for right now. This is going to be anything that's greater than or equal to rare quality. So that's going to be the first thing. I know I'm going to have to dump this in here. So let's see if we can, I'll grab my trusty card here and I'll place this here. Okay, cool. So there is a spot where we can actually just barely get this to fit both sides. So now ideally what I would like is I'd like to basically pull out Q2. Now I can't just use one inserter, and one of the reasons is, if you notice, there's a reason I have basically this flickering going on and I include sulfur uncommon, is because whenever this is swinging basically into the cargo wagon, that moment where it's stopping, there's a very high chance that you're going to get an uncommon sulfur that's going to come out of that, and then the machine will stop for a period of time, and that resting period is enough to basically completely stop production and not get the full 30 per second that we need per side. So for that reason, I'm going to need at least 2 of these. So we're going to go ahead and copy that. Now for the common stuff, well, that's really easy. We're going to shove that right in here so we can just basically have that constantly upcycling. Now, one other thing is we're going to have to occasionally pull out of here also anything that's greater than or equal to, but pretty rarely. So like this will happen. We probably can't clock this because there's no like deterministic way to prove like when this is going to get the items out. So all these are going to have to remain unclocked. But okay, that's kind of crazy. I knew the hitbox was cursed, but I didn't realize it was that cursed. Cool. So we can basically fit this really nice and snug right in here. So let's go plop that down. So that means we can fit all these things really easily in here, and that's actually pretty awesome. So then I guess the output here would just literally be this. The only thing that I'm missing is I'm gonna have occasionally I'm gonna get a chance where basically both of these are sometimes going to, or predominantly 75% of the time at least, is going to be making common stuff. So this is already going to directly insert this, so I just have to choose one. I don't think I can fit this here. Yeah, that's not going to let me do that. So I have to still use this one. That's unfortunate that this one's always going to do it, but what we could do is we could probably clock these and have one active and the other one unactive, and that'd probably be a nice way to kind of split the two. And also give us some resting period for this, so it's not constantly monitoring the inputs of this. So I've already pre-done the work here of creating a car that's going to already have all of the conditions that I need. So that's already in a good spot. And the reasons I've chosen this is just like I want a huge buffer of just basically sulfur, because that's going to be the predominant thing that will probably get put in here. But I just want like a small cap of basically sulfur. The rest will just be basically an overflow. And then just in case there's ever like, because there is some RNG to this, they have basically stacks of 50, but that should be enough to basically remove them from here. So then, in essence, what we could do is, let's say we bring this out, and then I'll bring basically my trusty testing utility here. And I'll bring in, we're just going to want like basically for this test, like some yellow belts that are going to go out. Now, originally, the way that I had this set up was I had basically these 2 that were on here. Instead of going back to brute force calculations, and we could probably redo this, let's just try a couple different combinations that are just going to be maybe like us, like, because now we're just doing straight quality grinding. So maybe we can do something like this, and then also place this here. We can probably then mirror this in a second. I just want to kind of test this out in general. Now I want to make sure I don't touch that, just to make sure that I don't have any overlap there. Now that's not going to fit exactly, so we could just snug these up real nicely here. That gets us to, let's see, what is the quality is that? Is 19.6. That's okay. Let's just try it. Let's basically kick this off. What I'm going to do now is let's get some pipes going. So just simply we'll move this out. There's no reason to change basically the outputs here. I'm just going to do this quickly here. So, okay. So we're going to need, let's see, water, and we're going to need petroleum. So let's try that. And let's see if we can get this to basically just unclocked, basically, if this will be enough production. Okay, cool. That seems to be holding in slight surplus. So, all right, awesome. Well, that's great. So, okay, so let's try flipping this. I'll hold shift to copy this. So I'll grab the vehicle that's already in here, and I've basically, like, this is a decent spot where this is basically getting copied. Now, I need to have basically the same inputs, so let's try getting some pipes over here. I don't know, something like this. Maybe then hook this up, and then we can do this here, and then I could just have, I don't know, just for testing purposes right now, something like this. It's all the way over, and then boom. So that seems to be working. Now, I don't like that these are constantly active, so we can probably improve that with some clocking. But before we even do clocking, like, let's just make sure that this is never outputting, like getting backed up. But okay, cool. So we're not having an issue with sulfur here, like basically this version here. So the normal quality. This is always backing up. This is already like in a decent spot. That still keeps the crafting speed. The only issue that I still have is that kind of artificial constraint that I have right now of I want this to fit within this design here in total. So I'll grab this as the print here just to kind of align this. And then I have this issue where this is not going to get aligned. So what I'm curious about is like in reality, I might be able to shift these beacons around. And I think the way that we could potentially do this is because like okay, just like the thing about the distribution efficiency here, like we're intentionally getting this down to where we have 2 beacons and 2 uncommon or like not uncommon, but 2 quality 2 speed modules. We can get probably the same thing by just basically putting this next to it. Now we'd have to make some changes here, but what I'm thinking here is the following. So we need this to be at, it seems like right now, 19.6%, which is about what we had here. Oh, the quality was even worse there. All right, cool. So this seems to work better because we have a higher quality chance, so that's good. Now we've crushed the quality here, and this seems to still work, but I think we want the same ratio. What we could just simply do is just put 2 efficiency modules in here. That'll touch all of these 4. And then what we can do is just eliminate this, and then that's back to 19.5%, so that's close enough to what we had before. It's going to change a little bit because of like this beacon and this beacon having like not the same ratios. There's a kind of a difference in the way that it's calculated by the game engine, but like I don't think that's going to be an issue. And then let's see, so this is then 19.5%, so it's a slightly worse quality just because of the beacons are not in the same, or the modules aren't distributed the same way that they were before, so it's slightly higher. There's some rounding that gets done in the way the beacons are calculated, but let's just watch for a little bit and see how this actually fares here with this layout, because this is now smaller than this like configuration, which is kind of what I want. And this is just going to be here just literally for having the distribution. Like, we don't even need the efficiency in here. Like, it's going to make no difference, but we might as well just add it in here just to basically improve the efficiency of these 2 things. And that seems like really solid for constantly outputting 30 items per second. Solid. Awesome. Okay, so I'd like to clock this, so I'm going to go in here and I will try to... Let's pick a clock. All right, so now what's going to be output here? So pretty simply, the output here is we're going to have 30 items per second. So that's going to be, I want to output 16 items, and the ratio is going to be 30 items per second. And then we multiply that by 60, so that's every 32 ticks I need to swing once. So pretty simple. So I want this to double swing because, again, I've been doing that for the first part of this for engines. So we're going to do the exact same thing here for double swing. So let's just create a period where this is going to be less than 64. So, and then, of course, -1. So that's going to be 63 on the output. And if you don't know what I am talking about right now, just go check the last video that where I mentioned this, and then you can basically see exactly what I mean by why I'm going -1. So let's go and put this in here, and then what I will do is I'm going to just basically say, well, I know this is going to take 24 ticks to swing. This might have back pressure like this, so maybe we'll reduce it. But like, just simply, we'll just like basically say this and this is going to be greater than or equal to, let's say 0, and then this is going to be less than 24. So then that's basically the first tick, and then up to the 24th tick, so the 23rd is when it will turn off, but then this is at the 24th, so it's easier for me to think about. And I'll just basically just call this the, I'll actually put quality for these signals. And then what I'm going to do then is I'll go ahead and attach this to here and to here, because red is usually my output signal. So I'm going to need something here. I'll just basically just do my normal thing, which is anything is greater than 0. And do this here. So let's just watch this and see kind of what happens. We'll watch this for a little bit. This should always fill the belt. And eventually this should maybe back up, but I don't think it will, because this should be an exact output rate. So these should be able to always drop like this perfectly. Nice. Okay. That seems to work great. Love that. Okay, so now one of the things that I mentioned here is like, I don't like that these are constantly active. Like we don't need them all the time active. So we can probably set up a couple other conditions here. So let's just copy these here. And let's say this one is going to be, I'll make this rare because that's going to go to this guy. And then this one's going to be just normal. So that's going to be here. Now, kind of, if I'm just observing this, like how often, so this swings 1, 2, this swings 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So let's try like a larger period here. So let's say we go up to, let's go up to like 128 and we'll go -1. And then I'll just add an extra condition here. So I'll say, or the clock is greater than or equal to 64. And the clock is less than 64 plus 24 ticks to get them out. So we'll do that. That'll be the exact same clock here, exactly the same way, working to kind of constantly put them out. But now we have a larger clock interval. So let's just hook these up and let's just find like some random periods here. So it seems like right now, like probably the chances of this happening, I don't know. I'm just going to mess with some different values here. So we can try like, for this, I don't care. We could set, like, let's say the very first part of the period is when we can insert this. So we'll just do 0 less than 24. Sure, cool. Let's just go ahead and add this in here. So I'll say this, and this, and basically I'll say anything is greater than 0, and I'll do this here and this here. Then I'll do the same thing, and I'll just say, like, now, after this period is done, so we'll say greater than or equal to, I don't know, 25, so it's just afterwards, and we'll just say this. It's greater than or equal to 25, go ahead and output this item. Cool, works for me. So I'll connect this and connect this, and then I will say again, this seems to have some copied over settings from, we'll say greater than 0, and we'll put that over there, so shift right click, shift left click, so both of those are enabled. Now let's just see how this works. This seems like it's like still fine. I'm wondering if we can get away. Oh, and I'm having an issue with this. Anything greater than 0. Why is this not outputting anything? And this. Are we? Ooh, okay. Let's clear this for a second. Let's see if that was just a transient thing because I wasn't running the other one. This one seemed to be fine. Let's monitor this for a little bit. Okay, seems like it was just an RNG thing because I was keeping the other one not active during that time. Or this one not disabled. So, okay, so that seems okay. We'll keep running this and we'll see if this runs into any other issues. But, so at the surface, this looks good. This seems like it's still like checking a lot more often than potentially is needed. So I'm wondering, like, if we can even like further reduce this. So we could go up an extra one, so 64 times 3 minus 1, so then we're at 191 maybe, and let's try adding one more condition, and this is greater than or equal to, this is going to be now 128, right? 0, 64, 128, and then this clock is less than 128, plus so there we go, 152. Okay, so we have the same thing now, just 3 times separated for this. But now we have a small crafting period where we can pull these out, which may not be enough, but we can see. And I'm using, of course, here a bulk inserter because I'm not guaranteeing a full stack size that's going to be in here. So I don't want to get stuck on epic and legendary. So I'm just basically going to just use a bulk inserter to just keep it generic and simple. So let's try this. So we'll say this is greater than or equal to 25. Let's try to do this. Let's create a couple different conditions. So this is greater than or equal to 25, and this is less than 25 plus it takes 8 ticks to swing, so we'll just do 8. That'll be one time like this, and then it can be enabled, and we can do another one. We could say, and this is greater than or equal to, let's say 64. And then this is 25 plus 16, or just, you know, like, let's say just plus 8. Oops. And I'll say this. Or, and, greater than or equal to 64. And I will say 64 plus 8. So then that will allow that to clear it kind of quickly. That'll grab 16 items. Let's see if that can just kind of hold in here. Nope, that's going up a little bit too much. So let's try creating a, let's see, this is greater than or equal to 24, so this is here. Let's allow a little bit of extra breathing room then. I'll create another condition, and I will say and here, and we'll do then again greater than or equal to 128. And then this will be just clock less than 128 plus 8. So, and then this got blocked. Let's see if we can catch up again. Okay, so that's still not enough for this to be active all the time. So let's give some breathing room then here. So I'll just say like, hey, this is greater than or equal to 25. This is less than 33. And then we'll do 25 plus 16 instead, and then 64 plus 16. So we'll just double basically the amount of activation time in this whole cycle here. So 128 plus 16. Okay, so let's try this again, and removing all of these in here, and removing all of these, and let's see if we can hold up now. All right, it looks at least better, because then at least we're not all the time active. There's still RNG, right? So like there's not much that you can really do. And this can consume 69 per second, so in theory, like the max capacity that we could get to, like I think this is fine. This is at least like not running them all the time, because we know that we're not going to need them, and we can just kind of observe this and just see that this is constantly still outputting. And this seems like this is not our bottleneck, this is not our bottleneck. Nice. Okay. I think this is pretty decent for like what we needed for this. So what I'll do now is I'll basically let this just back up and see if we have any issues with that. And no, of course not. So we'll undo that and then let it run again. Free flow. That seems to be enough of a buffer there. Great. Okay. Cool. So, ooh, what happened there? Oh, we ran out of rare. So I might need to enable this a little bit longer. So that might be an issue. I'm happy that I just caught that, because that would be bad. Let me see if I can fix that off camera here and mess with a couple more settings, and then see if I can get the perfect combo, and then I'll be back. So I flipped the conditions actually now, and this seems to work a lot better. So what I do now is I'm just saying, hey, whenever this is greater than or equal to 64, just void any of the other materials whenever they come in. And there's most of the time you're not even going to have rare, so this is fine, just kind of just relying on wakeless and being active. And then what I do instead is I just double swing initially of the sulfur right in the beginning, and because it's 3 swings, so you see 1, 2, 3 like this. That actually winds up working out, because like most of the time this just like builds up a tiny little buffer. You can see just in practice once this is output blocked like this, or full. And then this winds up getting to a point where it can just basically do like 3 swings is what I kind of noticed. So just experimenting, removing everything in here, just seeing if there's any issues with that. Just like RNG is still a thing, so just always making sure that this always comes back down. And then again, just kind of stopping this, starting it, stopping it, starting it. All right, seems like that's really stable. So let me go and set up a couple benchmark files, and then let's see if this is actually better than what we had previously. So once I create the benchmarks, and I'll be back with the results, and if this is better, then this will be actually a contender for what we can wind up using compared to the original version, which is over here. And I kind of like it because this is going to fit really nicely with this other build. Like if I just kind of like take this initially here and copy this over and look at this, this will be like a nice just module that I can just stick either at the very front end and put everything with all the other chemical plants and everything that I need. And that will route pretty nicely. So cool. I like it. So for the benchmark before I run it, I'm actually just ran here and just finishing now is belt sanitizer. So it's a nice update that Policy wound up creating for this, and I can just kind of showcase it here. So one of the things that I'm immediately doing here is I just ran it for 36,000 ticks. I wound up setting it up beforehand to basically have it already enabled, and then we can just basically look at the amount of basically all the other stats that we wanted. So I told it to do sulfur, so we can go and target that. But what I want is the uncommon sulfur to be about equal between the two saves, and they are. So both of them are really close to 108, which is exactly the output that I would expect because of the amount of clones that I created. But the interesting part is if you look at the old version versus the new one already, the old one is making so much more normal sulfur that we're going to have to do something to eradicate with. So already the ratios are better. And then the other thing that you can look at is just like petroleum gas is about the same and water consumption is the same. So like it doesn't seem like that really makes a big difference in terms of what in terms of the actual raw fluids that we're consuming, but in terms of like the amount of rares and epics, those are all really close to basically the amounts that we're creating, which makes sense because we kept the same base chemical or cryogenic plant rather. But the big difference is now we are using more of the recyclers to create more uncommon. So the question kind of is like, okay, now we have a better ratio. We're not creating more normal sulfur that we're having to void. Is this going to be better? So now that we've benchmarked this, I know for a fact that the uncommon sulfur production is the same. Now this is in a good spot where I can go and say, okay, cool, let me go and run now the actual benchmark itself. I'll run it for 36,000 ticks. So I'll give it like basically 5 runs each, and then we'll come back with the results afterwards. All right, so we're back with the results. So ran it for 36,000 ticks for 3 runs each, and just quickly doing a quick check here. So I added an extra one where cars were disabled. I know from previous experience in mega basing that disabling them on for all the entities on the surface was just in general a good thing. So that wound up, that's where you can see this 2% improvement that was there between the new version and then the new with cars disabled. So the old version that was using trains is about just like 4.4% worse than the newest version with cars disabled. So it seems like the main things that wound up changing is actually entity update time actually went up here, but the control behavior update time and then the transport line update time actually went down as well. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I think like the I'm not going to focus on transport line time because that was like a very similar across them. The main outlier is that control behavior update time, and I think it's just one inserter. So I think like in the end, this doesn't make a huge difference. Just the main benefit that I get is I don't have to be locked into the 2x2 grid for trains, and then I also get to experiment with cars. So that'll be now in the new design. So back to before I go back to Factorio, I'll just show like some of the other cool stats that are here. So here's with the cars disabled versus the version with the cars enabled. There's not like a very obvious waveform pattern difference. It just seems like the overall average was better, and that's all I care about for average being king. This is a lot more consistent in terms of like kind of more spiky updates with having just one giant chest that is being shared compared to 2 cars. But overall, in the end, the thing that I care about the most is just strictly that the average is better. So, and then there's the 1800 ticks just to basically look at them. You can see like with the cars, there's a much more kind of like gradular, like kind of like this pattern here because they're based on clocks. And the old version was using just like basically just no clocking at all. So it seems like that particular wave, and this makes sense because this is in like 192 tick, where there are these kind of like preceding patterns that kind of emerge from that. So the clocking seemed to help a little bit too. So cool, overall net improvement, back to Factorio. We're back over in Factorio. I'm now just basically testing out the amount of petroleum that we're actually going to need for this build. Looks like over a 10-minute period, we need about 176,000. So that means per second, we need just over 3,000 per second petroleum. So that's gonna basically work out for what we're going to need here. So just create like an isolated temporary test surface here just so that we can basically test this out. So it seems like we're gonna need 3,000. So kind of comparing this seems like basically what we had here. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 3 will be just enough for that. We'll get 1 more to basically produce the plastic that we need. Not that we're gonna need all that much more, but we might as well have this with like an RS latch. So you can kind of take this portion here, and I'll incorporate this just kind of as the beginning piece here, and I'm going to try to fit it again, basically redesign this so that it fits within that same kind of like grid pattern, and then I'll be back after that. So I've come up with the following layout that I'm going to be using for sulfur and also for petroleum production. So one of the concessions that I made was, okay, I can't quite get all 16 around in order to honor my original footprint that I wanted, so we'll just go with 14. We lose basically about 50 or so of petroleum production, but I think this is going to be fine because one of the additional things I'm doing here is I'm making it so that all the petroleum can be shared by just tiling it to the side. So that will help in general, and there's like an RS latch effectively that's just monitoring the output of the storage tank and will turn on and off. So in theory, this could have only one and shared across all of them in the entire bank. That's kind of the idea, is to have one version that has all the clocking, and everything else just kind of follows that downstream. So for that, like, this is kind of the main layout here, and then I made a slight change to the actual layout of the sulfur production. One of the problems that I was running into was like, okay, I can't really tile this nicely because then the beacons are still going to overlap, and then this is going to overproduce and wildly create way too much common sulfur for this to keep up. So since it's all kind of like figured out, like, because it's so so sensitive to that, I just moved this beacon over so then it can get shared, and then also they will wind up nicely tiling. So if I copy this section here, and I'll be sure to include the new vehicles that I'm using, and I copy this over, now we have something that should immediately basically consume, basically share the petroleum across both of these. So now it has the benefit of more of these running at the same time, but then also should be able to just easily be able to tile right next to each other, and then in theory be able to bring these clocks over. So I think the last touches that I'll do here is I will wind up going and adding basically just the power pole connections, just so that we have that now, just connecting everything here. And then since we should be able to just basically send, hopefully, these signals across, and I'll find a decent way to kind of propagate these values because we need like 3 green wires and things. So maybe we'll bring one of the green wires across and then bring it over. But we'll figure that out once we finish red circuits and then finally the main design. I'll quickly touch on here the last part before I close out this video. This design here is effectively exactly the same as one of the designs that we've already seen previously. So this is the design that Thalen originally created. So I copied effectively just this design. This was in the Q1 series, so this was one of the final contestants. I like this design, I just wanted to change it around a little bit slightly. So this is probably objectively better because this has got 120 beacons. Again, I'm just a person who's just prone to just stylistic choices, so if you just look at this in general, there's 120 beacons, then 66 inserters, so all the inserters and everything will be the same number of buildings. There's 120 beacons. Over here, this layout has 150 beacons, so it's substantially more, but it winds up tiling nicely, and I'm going to basically take the idea that this is going to tile, and that is more important to me side to side than it is in reducing the beacons for a small cluster like this and then having to make the compromise of putting it on the outside. So that's mainly the design choice that I made differently. Otherwise, the clocking and everything is the exact same concept that we talked about in the engine, basically the engine series that I had just done the previous episode of this, so go check that out if you missed it. But it's the same exact clocking that was used. This is now just Q2, so there's no net new difference because everything is the exact same ratio. So I use the exact same clock that was set there to produce the exact amount that we need, and you can see how it always just perfectly fills all the belts. So this all worked out because this was a 12 beacon setup. The original setup that was created by Thalen also is a 12 beacon setup, so this works out nicely and then basically can just be used. And I added some lights because I like lights and I like being able to see in the dark. So with that, thank you very much for watching. My name is Nasty. I'll see you in the last episode where we go and design the red circuit build and then put it all together, and we will test and benchmark the final build itself.